12 years ago, I had this major heartbreak. I was suffering from debilitating back pains, from sleep problems, from panic attacks. And I was thinking that if love can make me this sick, love has to be able to heal me.
Dr. Emilia Vuorisalmi is a medical doctor, author, and wellness expert known as
the Love Doctor, helping people harness hormones to heal, thrive, and build better relationships.
All of us would have heard about these three hormones, the dopamine, the serotonin, and the oxytocin. But I don't think we'd ever attach them to just love hormones.
In this state of a heartbreak, there's also a lot of cortisol, noradrenaline. So basically, it's like the similar phase than falling in love, but now it has become negative. And when the relationship ends at that state, it creates a huge drop in your dopamine baseline.
I read in your book that sex can increase dopamine by 100% above base level.
Connection is probably the one single most important thing for the human survival. That's why oxytocin also stands up very high in a hormonal hierarchy.
How can one bring more connection to their lives?
Meditation helped me calm my nervous system. For me, it was also very hard and challenging to start to embrace boredom because, I was so addicted to the stress hormones.
A lot of it just feels like slowing down and connecting to ourselves, which can feel very hard when you're in a high stress state. What does a love addict mean? Do you think we should be friends with our exes? What is the timeline of getting back up and back to yourself again?
Well, it's kind of a...
Firstly, I want to say thank you to tuning in and listening to the show. It means a huge amount. And connecting with all of you is something that I absolutely love as part of this journey of growing the show. One of my biggest goals of 2025 is doubling the reach of this show. And I can't do that without your support. So I would love to ask you a favor. If you can press subscribe or follow on whichever platform you listen to. This helps us reach more people. And for me, elevating women in science is so fundamental and ethical and scientific information. So if you feel the show empowers you and gives you the information that you've been seeking, I would love to ask a favor in return and to hit that subscribe button and help me reach the goal that I've set for the show of 2025. Thank you. Emilia, welcome to Live Well, Be Well. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm going to start off by just basically introducing you that you are known as the Love Doctor, especially in Finland, which is where you're from. Explain to me, how are you known as the Love Doctor and what does that mean?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story because 12 years ago, I had this major heartbreak. And before that, I used to be very healthy. And suddenly my health was gone. I was suffering from debilitating back pains, from sleep problems, from panic attacks. And I was thinking that if love can make me this sick, love has to be able to heal me. So I started to dive deep into the science of love. And I wrote my first book already 10 years ago about this topic. And so I became the Love Doctor of Finland, which was pretty ironic because I was a love addict at the time.
What does a love addict mean?
Well, the thing was that I started to medicate the pain with relationships. So I was, that became the drug. I felt that, no pain medication or anything was kind of helping me. But at some point I noticed that when I would hit the high state of love, my pain would just ease for a little moment. So yeah, that became the drug of my choice. And that actually then took me eventually to some dark places. And as Dr. Mate says, that there's a very fine line between addiction and passion.
Yes.
But passion creates, addiction consumes. And I must say that the relationships were really consuming my energy. So one day I was at a very dark place and I asked the question that now when, at that point I knew kind of that what was the healthy neurochemistry of attachment phase of love, kind of when you have already gone through the high phase.
So that's like the honeymoon phase,
Yeah, the
right?
honeymoon phase, there's very high dopamine. You actually have these serotonin drops that might make you anxious and think oh my God, he might be leaving me. And we might even kind of just throw the relationship away because of that fear and anxiety that it creates. But the kind of actually evolutionary purpose for that anxiety is to bring the two people together and have sex and get the oxytocin and the serotonin high again and feel great. But well, that high state lasts in average year and a half. And after that, we have this attachment phase where the neurochemistry is more balanced. And there are these 3 hormones, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, that are in this kind of nice balanced state. So my question was, how could I get there without a relationship? And that was kind of how this whole journey started. And actually, the result is the book next to you.
Well, I think it's so interesting, right? Because all of us would have heard about these 3 hormones, the dopamine, the serotonin, and the oxytocin. But I don't think we'd ever attach them to just love hormones, right? I normally think about serotonin as the happy hormone. And I really want to break them down. But like before we get into understanding, 1, if we're on balance, 2, if we're off balance, I want to start with the love addiction, right? Because I think heartbreak is such a big thing for so many people. I have been through many rounds of heartbreak, and it's probably the thing that's debilitated me the most, more than anything, more than work drama, more than family drama. It's actually been heartbreak that has broken me the most, mentally, physically, in every way. And I think so many people listening to this will relate. We don't talk about heartbreak in this way, right? Normally we have a broken heart and someone goes, oh, I'm sorry that you ended that relationship, or they broke up with you, and we kind of are meant to just move on. But it's actually quite a hard period to get through. So what I find interesting is that you obviously counteracted that with going out in more relationships to try and make yourself feel better. Can you explain this kind of moment in one's life when they're struggling with heartbreak, and why not always going to another relationship is the most efficient, and how does one know if they're in that love addiction cycle?
Yeah. So the thing is that for example, if I think about my own story, so the relationship that ended and made me suffer was actually a pretty short relationship. It was just a couple of months. But the thing is that at that point, we're kind of, the dopamine levels are at their highest. So basically, and we don't have those negative, we don't have any negative memories or anything. It was like kind of, the thing is that it's that state that Romeo and Julia or the Notebook movie or any book and story, it's about actually that high state of love. It's not about the attachment phase. And when the relationship ends at that state, it creates a huge drop in your dopamine baseline. Because the thing with dopamine is the higher the spike, so basically the longer and deeper the drop in the baseline dopamine. So you can imagine that, for example, I've always been kind of, I have had this very passionate, like intense relationship. You're smiling like you know what I'm talking about it.
I know what you're talking about.
So then, and it's also
like a drug.
Yeah. And I think it comes because I don't know your family background, but my parents, they had that story that my mom was a socialite and she met my dad. I think she was 28, riding bare-chested a white horse, and she left everything and sacrificed her life to stay with him on this beautiful farm, and we were born, and that was the story I wanted. And so in my case, I found that, and then it didn't work. So I was miserable. And what happened?
What age were you at this?
I was, I think, like 32 or something.
Okay.
Around 32, yeah. So, and what happens then is that the drop in a baseline dopamine levels make us very anxious, and kind of also like we might have lots of pain and just like
overthinking.
Everything feels empty and you can't concentrate because like kind of every cell wants to win that love back. And then when that wasn't happening, so there were always even a bigger drop in the dopamine baseline, more anxiety, more stress. And the thing is also that when we are in this state of a heartbreak, there's also a lot of cortisol, noradrenaline. So basically, it's like the similar phase than falling in love, but now it has become negative.
Yes.
So it's energy consuming.
I love it that you referenced, the thing that caused me the most pain was falling out of love, or, the breakup. But actually, I knew that because love was the center component in that, I needed love to bring me back out of it. But it's love for yourself, right? Is that the kind of epicenter of this whole journey?
Well, the thing is that, you're really now touching something. So the story that I was telling 12 years ago was that I got sick because I had lost the love of my life. But the truth, what I'm thinking today, is that I didn't get sick because of that. I got sick because I had lost the direction in my own life. And I was trying to look for direction from the relationships. I was trying to look for purpose from relationships. And this is why in the book I have named dopamine as the molecule of direction. Because I think once we have found back to our true path, where our values are aligned with our daily actions, and we feel that I'm actually using my superpowers to some common good, and I know my place now. So dopamine starts to kind of flow more sustainably. And we start that addictive behavior starts to kind of diminish. We don't have that tendency anymore. But as I told you, we can't talk about dopamine without touching serotonin and oxytocin, because I wouldn't have been able to get there unless I would have also worked with my serotonin and oxytocin levels.
So for many people listening to this, I mean, I'm such a big believer in what you say is actually, I think a lot of the times when I've had the heartbreak, focusing back on myself, which has been the hardest thing. And it's a lot that I speak to friends about that have also gone through heartbreak, or people that write into the show. It can be very hard to like know what your direction is when you're in that state, because you're normally crumbling. But when we're thinking about these hormones and how they can help us, it's also very hard to visualize, because you can't see what's going on, right? You might be able to feel differently, but you can't see something like your muscles changing. You know, if you want to go to the gym, you'll work on your muscle mass and you can see them changing over time. So we've just mentioned dopamine. How do you check in with where these levels might be, right? Because it's obviously not a blood test. So how can one listening to this right now, he's going, well, yeah, maybe I feel that, or I did feel that, or maybe I'm going through this love addiction. How can you check in with where you are now? And then let's get to kind of the things that we can do to help keep these hormones in check.
One thing is how you sleep. Like, I think sleep is always a good indicator. You know, when your hormones are well balanced, usually sleep is a byproduct. Like, a good sleep is a byproduct of that. So I just can't stand when people say that you have to sleep. Because I know that, for example, when my hormones were unbalanced, I wasn't able to sleep.
Well, yeah, that's the first thing I think that goes.
And you know, I could do all those like sleep hygiene things, and my sleep was like horrible.
Yeah.
So I think it comes to questions like, how do you sleep when you wake up? Do you feel motivated? Do you feel like generally just kind of good about life? Or are you all the time anxious and maybe tired but wired? So my dopamine system was taking over,
right?
Because I didn't have the counterpart, the serotonin system in place. So what happened was that I was all over the place, too many ideas. Like I felt like I wasn't grounded, also, you know, because of oxytocin levels. But so I was there, you know, I didn't have any diagnosis, but looking back, maybe almost like a little bit hypomanic. In a way, that was
your drive, right? It was your drive for direction. So you've got this insane spurt of dopamine happening, which I think many of us can relate to, because that feels quite a fight or flight state. But then what was your serotonin levels like? Because you call this the molecule of safety.
Yeah.
But I think many people listening will go, oh, I've never heard of that before. I would think of serotonin as the happy hormone. So your safety molecule, your own safety in yourself, I guess, was quite low.
So I was missing that. And happy hormone, these are all happy hormones. I don't really like that term. So that's why I wanted to call the molecule of safety, because serotonin, it has to do about being valued, feeling worthy, and feeling like safe. So if you're a serotonin dominant person, so basically you prefer security over risks. I'm very dopamine dominant, probably you as well. So I love risks. I love novelty. I love all the dopamine stuff. So I was actually ignoring serotonin because I thought it was the boring hormone.
Wow.
And then now I know that it's everything else but boring. And we all need all these hormones. So I had to take a look at myself and ask the question, what I'm afraid of. Because the thing was that I wasn't aware of there were a lot of like limiting beliefs and fears that were living inside of me that were blocking my dreams to really happen. First, I needed to pause, ask this question, and also do some somatic therapy. For example, I found out that I had huge fear of being left alone because of the story I was telling that love was the biggest prize in life. And so I had to really, really get friends with the fear and understand that I could actually, I could be happy without a relationship and to just be with myself. And I remember a moment, it was actually during the pandemic, and I had just moved to a new apartment with my 2 kids, and I felt that I was happiest that I had ever been. And it was so strange because the world was kind of going crazy and there was so much fear and insecurity, but I felt very safe inside me.
That's a really interesting feeling.
But the thing was that I actually, to be able to heal that side, I had to face this one very kind of abusive relationship. Because sometimes, we're stubborn. So for me, it had to kind of come and teach me that this is actually the thing was that I was looking for the safety outside me. So basically from relationships. And that's why I was getting into these toxic relationships. And they were like mirrors.
I've spent years in the fashion industry, but also years as a scientist trying to understand how our bodies are meant to move. And I'll be honest with you, most shoes are terrible for our feet. I know this firsthand. For years, I wore the wrong shoes, ones that looked great, but in reality gave me persistent back pain and messed up toenails. I searched everywhere for a pair of shoes that wouldn't just support my feet, but would also help them heal. And I struggled because most healthy shoes don't exactly scream style. And then I found Vivo Barefoot, something that finally looks good and actually works. I wear mine with cargo pants, awesome leather trousers, a crisp white tee, and my favorite sunnies. Not only do they feel great, but they really fit my style. Wide, thin, and flexible, these shoes allow my feet to move naturally the way they're supposed to. And the best part, just 6 months of barefoot shoes can increase your foot strength by 60%, helping to undo the years of damage from conventional footwear. Now, if you've ever had the same problem and tried to find a shoe that supports your body without sacrificing style, then this is it. Try Vivo Barefoot for yourself and feel the difference. You can get 20% off if you use the code LWBW20 at vivobarefoot.com, where the T's and C's apply. Trust me, your feet, your back, and your outfit will thank you.
Yeah, they're mirroring exactly what you were.
Yeah.
What you were in yourself. I guess when we're thinking about these hormones, right, and we're talking about it, somebody might say, well, if you've got low serotonin, isn't that just simple prescription of an SSRI? Because I think when we're thinking about neurochemicals and how they influence our brain and why some people end up suffering with depression, it's because they have an imbalance, right, of certain neuromodulators like these serotonins and oxytocins. So what's your view on that? Because what I'm hearing is there's a lot of reflection on oneself and then a lot of somatic therapies, which is very like bodywork therapies, if people haven't heard about that, and feeling like touch and getting back into your own system. How did you navigate, or from the science perspective, not thinking about it from a medication perspective? Because I guess for some people that also might not work if there's a proper imbalance of chemicals.
Yeah. Well, the tricky thing is that when we talk about medication, it's of course because we can only, most of the research is on medicines that are patented. So we don't really do research on these free things as breathing or feeling gratitude or kind of the basically easy free stuff. But there is research which is kind of backing this theory, like when we have something very challenging in our life, which in my case was the end of this relationship. So first, there's a huge spike of serotonin. And basically, if the situations gets chronic or prolonged, the serotonin base level will drop. So basically that was what was happening in my life, and that's what's happening in a lot of other people's life.
Yeah.
And it's actually same with oxytocin that we're probably then talking later on, that challenging traumatic experiences, they cause a drop in the base level oxytocin. They cause a drop in the baseline oxytocin levels. And it's kind of a little bit tricky, because if we think oxytocin is the molecule of connection, and let's say that if there's some neglect or some kind of challenge in your childhood, it might affect the oxytocin levels, which then again makes you feel isolated and makes it more challenging to have a connection with other people, makes you even afraid of making connection with new people. And that would be the medicine for you. So it's kind of easily it becomes a negative spiral.
So the medicine is being more connected with people.
Yes, like if I'm thinking, of course, connection is always like a medicine.
Yeah,
we're
of
born to be
course.
connected. Connection is probably the one single most important thing for the human survival. So that's why oxytocin also stands up very high in a hormonal hierarchy.
Yeah.
So we talk about these three molecules as hormones, but they are also neuromodulators, which means that they control lots of other hormones under them. So let's say oxytocin, under that we have insulin, we have cortisol, we have thyroid hormones. And also under oxytocin, we have estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So for example, when we talk about premenopause or menopause, so doing now this work, I strongly feel that actually this inner work that I'm talking in this book, it's the work that we need to do during this time in our life if we haven't done it before.
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically the word pause is guiding us to just take some time and look at the things that, hey, who am I? Am I on my true path? What I'm afraid, what are the fears that might be still leading me? And also how connected am I to myself? Because we need to be connected to ourselves to be able to connect to other people and the nature and the whole world.
100%. I think like going with the dopamine, which is the direction and reward, then going on to the serotonin, which is the molecule of safety. I want to touch on how we can kind of increase them, but let's touch on the hierarchy, which is the oxytocin, right? Which I think is the oneness and connection. And I've always thought about oxytocin as, women's oxytocin levels increase when they have their child and there's a newborn baby and they touch their skin to skin contact for the first time, or you're hugging someone. Someone will say if you hug someone for 20 seconds, I'm not sure if this is a scientific fact, if you hug someone for 20 seconds, your oxytocin levels increase. Bonding, sex, all of those things are what helps increase your oxytocin. But we are in a loneliness epidemic. And so we're more disconnected than ever before. So you said, when we have low oxytocin levels, maybe when we're feeling more disconnected than ever before or more isolated, how can one bring more connection to their lives? Because I think there's that really hard moment when sometimes we know what we should be doing, but every part of our body does not feel connected, or we could be around loads of people and we do just feel very isolated. Because I don't think it's about just being simply on your own. I think you can be in the room with, 4 of your best friends and still feel very isolated. So when you're in that moment and you intellectually know, well, I should be feeling more connected, but you don't, how can you, I guess, connect is maybe the word to say, but how can you overcome that?
Such a good question. And this was exactly what I was struggling with. I had that feeling, there were lots of friends, I had, family, everything, but I just felt so lonely and disconnected.
Yeah.
But the thing was that for me to really kind of get my oxytocin baseline in a healthy level, so I think meditation was a game changer. Because at that time, after the heartbreak, there was like years that I would spend time all the time either ruminating in the past, what if I would only have done this differently or whatever, or in the future. So meditation kind of helped me to bring back that light and see the forest from the trees and calm my nervous system and kind of start taking steps actually from that dark place, from that dark relationship out to the light. So I think that was one thing. And I think there are a lot of high performers listening to this. And for me, it was also very hard and challenging to start to embrace boredom. Because, I was so addicted to the stress hormones.
I think when we're talking about like these three hormones, the dopamine, the serotonin, and the oxytocin, they're all quite interlinked in the modalities and the tools that we should be using to kind of, I guess, help balance, whether it's meditation, which is oxytocin. They're all lifestyle things that we can implement. But a lot of it just feels like slowing down and connecting to ourselves, which can feel very hard when you're in a high stress state. And I guess from patients that I see that are in this state, to myself, to friends, we always have this moment where we're like, well, maybe in 3 months I'll feel better. Maybe in 6 months I'll be back to who I was. Like, from a scientific perspective, how long is a piece of string? But how long naturally does it take to rebalance our hormones? Because for you, it was a couple of months of a relationship that made maybe the darkest period in your life happen. When we hit that moment of heartbreak or loneliness or whatever it is that makes all of our love hormones drop, what is the timeline of getting back up and back to yourself again?
Well, it's kind of a very hard question.
That's why I pose it.
Some research that it takes like 2 years, and then you should be really, really careful about not sleeping with your ex, because that will start the clock ticking from the start. Like a pro tip. It's crazy.
Do you believe that one should... It's interesting because I have friends that are best friends with their exes if nothing bad has happened. Yeah. Do you think we should be friends with our exes for that, or not for that reason?
I'm actually really good friends with all of my exes now, but I would recommend, if you have this like intense heartbreak, you should not be in touch with the ex. The less you see him, the better, or her. So, because that's just the dopamine system. If we keep scrolling their Instagram or whatever, our brain takes it as a sign that he's still there. And it's a little like dopamine boost every time. And it can be highly addictive, and it keeps kind of our brain thinking that it's possible.
So that's why when you break up from a relationship, I guess cold turkey and no contact is the best. Maybe blocking the number.
Yeah.
Just removing that person.
Yeah. But I also like, what has been very important for me is also to realize that if you love somebody, the love will never disappear. So I was like for years starting to fight against the feeling that I still love somebody, or I still love him. And then also the acceptance that I can still love him, but I don't have to be with him. So also like accepting the feelings that, I will probably always love him.
Yeah.
And by the way, I forgot when you were asking about the oxytocin tips and about meditation. So I know that meditation for a lot of people is just very challenging idea.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resistance because we're so addicted to that high cortisol, dopamine, noradrenaline state.
Especially when you're in a low state, I think it's harder. I think people, tend to... Maybe I speak for myself, but we all tend to go towards these like savior tips when we're in a really bad way.
Yeah.
And then we're already feeling unbalanced, so it's even harder to keep to them. Whereas when we're in a good place, we tend to not use these as much because we think, oh, well, we don't need them.
Yeah.
But actually what it does when you're in a good place is train your brain that when these really hard moments happen, we've got a little bit more ease and understanding that actually we feel more familiar with this practice.
Yeah, exactly. So what I was... about to say is that you can try, for example, yoga nidra, which is then easier, and I love it. And I just actually did a nice yoga nidra practice, like free one, because in Finland people are not that familiar with yoga nidra. And it's
Could you explain
helping...
what it is for people that might? I love
so
it.
So it's a non-sleep deep rest.
Yeah.
So basically, you just listen to an audio file for 20 minutes, so 20-30 minutes. And you lay down, and there's kind of this guided body scan. There's a little bit different kind of variations of yoga nidra. But the science shows that it gives you the health benefits of 2 hours of deep sleep. So it's highly beneficial. Plus, I feel that it's very good when you want to increase the connection with yourself. So, for example, for me, when I was also the thing is that when you have these challenging moments in your life, whether it's like a heartbreak or work stuff or somebody's sick in your family, so Yoga Nidra is an extremely good tool to give that extra energy that you need then. For example, there was a lot of nurses that were working for the Helsinki University Hospital during the pandemic that were super thankful because I had been, giving the Yoga Nidra for them as a tool, and they weren't, aware that that kind of practice exists. So they told that they wouldn't have survived the period, and without it. So I think that's a great tool. Holotropic breathing.
Let me tell you about OneSkin and why I'm genuinely fascinated by what they're doing. Founded by all-women team scientists, OneSkin is a skincare brand that's redefining how we age.
And you can get 15% off your first order using code LWBW.
What's caught my attention is their groundbreaking approach to skin health at a cellular level.
Instead of masking the signs of aging, OneSkin tackles the problem at its root with this OS01 peptide.
Here's how it works. As we age, our skin accumulates senescent cells, or zombie cells, that speed up aging in healthy cells, causing wrinkles and loss of elasticity. OneSkin's OS01 peptide
Is scientifically proven to target these cells,
reversing your skin's biological age for healthier, more resilient skin. This isn't about chasing eternal youth. It's about maintaining a strong, healthy skin at any age. And since your skin is the body's largest organ, keeping it healthy is key to your overall well-being.
So if you want to see what the science of longevity can do for your skin,
Visit oneskin.co/LWBW and use code LWBW for 15% off your first order. That's what saved me.
Yeah. For
when
me,
when I first had mine, because I was so numb in my body.
Yeah.
That I think it might be interesting to like relate it to the other hormones, which is like cortisol and our fight and flight hormones. Obviously, that was in such a high state that my body had become very numb. And it wasn't until 6 weeks later that a very good friend of mine came in and did a breathing exercise of holotropic breathing, and all of a sudden, I felt my whole body shift back into connection.
Yeah.
And I mean, I felt like I'd just taken a drug. I felt that someone had given me, an anesthetic because I was so out of it. But I remember coming round and I had a huge release in that as well. I think I couldn't release the pain that I was feeling. And when I went through that, it's all of a sudden I felt the ends of my fingers were tingling, and I felt all of the blood rushing through me. And I was like, wow, this is what it feels like to be back in my body just from breathing.
Yeah. It's amazing. And I highly advise doing it with a very a professional team, because there's also risks. Never do it alone. But for me, it was also like the experience. Like I remember waking up the next day and thinking, why would I drink coffee? Because it's kind of that fresh snow had kind of, if you think your brain as there's these neural pathways, and there's been like these skiing routes that have been skied hundreds and hundreds of times, and they're very deep. And then the holotropic breathing kind of brings the fresh snow there. So you're kind of open to new ways. And I was thinking at that moment that, oh my God, this must be very great tool for also when you're treating addictions.
Neuroplasticity.
And holotropic breathing. Like there's not that much research yet on that, but I just felt, because I'm one of these persons that I've had my morning coffee probably like 20 years, and now I felt like why would I drink it after that practice? And
what does it actually do to your neurochemicals? What is it that it's actually working with, like when you're breathing?
So
in that way.
So for the listeners, the holotropic breathing is you do this kind of very strong inhale, so you're increasing like the oxytocin level a lot in your body, and then you basically do long pauses, and the pauses are getting longer and longer. It might be even like minutes. Some people might stay like 4 minutes, 6 minutes without breathing. It sounds crazy. So it's affecting the carbon dioxide levels in our blood, and it's really kind of increasing the neuroplasticity in our brain, which I'm, explaining, that creating these new pathways. And then there's also a lot of stuff that we don't probably know what's really happening, because I have a lot of friends and patients that, for example, have heard that, let's say that a friend of mine, she had her uterus removed, and during the practice, she felt like kind of the energy filling the whole area. And in a way, I felt like my brain being washed.
Yeah.
And so basically after that session, I felt like I would have been meditating for 10 years. So the calmness was I was just so relaxing and felt so good. But the thing with all this kind of practices is that you should always prepare well. So kind of also start hopefully doing some little relaxing, let's say yoga nidra before. So your body is, so you don't go really from, it's sometimes it can be very challenging if you go from very high alert mode to this kind of exercise. But even more importantly, you should take care of that integration period. Like I've seen lots of people do this kind of practice and then they just keep on doing their everyday life. So nothing changes if nothing changes.
Yes, that's the key part, isn't it?
So I was so lucky that when I was doing, I don't know how it was for you, but when I was doing this, so I had space in my life to integrate. So I had just moved, I had actually just left a relationship and I was, in a new place with my kids. So I had that space to think about the questions that were arising. And there's also lots of times emotions coming on the surface. So for example, I would go to the forest and just scream. And this is in the, in modern culture, we're not allowed to, get these emotions out. And that's a big problem.
We think of anger, right, as a problem emotion, which like Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who came on the show, kind of spoke about how important it is to recognize these emotions and not judge them.
Yeah.
Become very curious about them. And I think that's something that when we were talking about this in a very easy way, but it's hard. It's a very uncomfortable place to get to. And I guess that takes back to stepping into the fear and becoming curious and not judgmental of those emotions that arise. It's really powerful. I think people don't talk about somatic work enough, and maybe people aren't even familiar with that word. But I think we've gone from yoga nidra and meditation to oxytocin. We've got the boundaries, and I think that's a fun way to build boundaries, if I'm honest with you. And then I am going to go all the way back to the start of dopamine. Yeah. So I read in your book that you can do a cold plunge and it will increase your dopamine by 50% above base level. And the best one is that sex, although this might be quite hard actually if you're trying to not be an addict in relationships, but sex can increase dopamine by 100% above base level. So according to science, you say that the dopamine system has the capability to reset itself, which I think is hopeful, knowing that we're in these moments of an ebb and flow. How do you do this with the dopamine, and how long would it take to reset itself?
Well, as you told, there's chocolate increases 600%, cold plunge even 250%.
Oh, wow.
Then drugs, I think cocaine was 100, meth 1,000. So if you think about one hit of meth equals 100 orgasms.
Please don't do that.
Don't do that, because how do you get back from there? That's the thing.
Yeah, that's not living well, and that's not being well.
But also, I think lots of people are struggling with porn, because that
porn
also
addiction.
Gives a huge spikes of dopamine. The research shows that actually 30 days going cold turkey usually brings the brain in more balanced state. But of course, it doesn't. It's not that simple if you think these heavy drugs, but we don't now think about those. But basically, just if you would suffer, for example, from porn addiction, so 30 days. Cold
30
turkey
days, no porn.
will kind of set your brain in a different state. Because the thing is that, for example, I've been thinking even you don't have to watch porn these days, because just watching opening Instagram or X, it's for lots of men, it's just offering literally porn.
Sex sells, right?
Sex sells.
Yeah.
So also thinking that, because the thing is that your brain thinks that, okay, these girls or guys, that they are available and there, so it might really reflect to your relationship. because unconsciously you start comparing and thinking that there are so many opportunities. So I would recommend like cutting all the accounts that would have that kind of content on. But it's hard because, the algorithm, it knows what you like, and if you're into it, so it will just like send more. So maybe it's then just to kind of trying to quit social media.
I guess people would say like, but what's wrong with me having high dopamine levels? I guess that's a question.
Well, I think high dopamine levels are great. Like, I think we wouldn't be what we do without our high dopamine levels. But the key is to have these other hormones balancing your dopamine. So, and that really took me for years to realize.
And how do you know how would I know, thinking about this, that I wouldn't have my serotonin and oxytocin in check, but I'm driving dopamine? What would I be feeling more anxious and more like on edge because I don't have that emotional safety, but I'd be driving quite quickly? That's how I guess you can
that
tell.
was what I was earlier explaining, that it's like almost the hypomanic behavior.
Oh, yeah.
That there's just too much going on.
Yes.
And you can't really focus. There's so much energy and you're kind of wasting it. And lots of times I feel that I think it was like Oprah that put it beautifully, that you're doing so much, but you feel like you're kind of always falling at the last hurdle in a way. And that was me 10 years ago.
I guess for like anyone listening to this who is like, okay, well, I'm connected to that love addiction. Maybe they're connected to online dating. That's quite a big thing right now. And I guess this is quite a nice way to like bring everything together. Is a lot of the times what I would see maybe this conversation and people connecting to it is swiping left or right or downloading lots of apps and feeling that it's like an online shopping place. How can one know if they're in the right state to be online dating, and two, like when they are dating different people, that they don't get caught in this trap of where we started, which is using other relationships to make oneself feel better? Because I think it's such a confusing space for so many people, and I get so many messages about this, about people being on their own, feeling lonely, going onto online dating, it's never working, and there's a whole kind of generation now that feel kind of quite alone in this space, and it is essentially online shopping for a love, which is hard. So how do we navigate this in today's world?
Well, I would advise to ask a question that, is there a pattern that is repeating? And if there is, so let's say you end up always finding guys that are not good for you.
Or
so
girls.
Or girls. Or whatever. These days there are like a lot of options. But so asking the question, why I'm doing this, and maybe then having the little pause, putting some work to yourself, because we always attract the energy that we are. So basically, until we do the work with ourselves, we will attract the same energy. So when I was unbalanced, I would just attract unbalanced people. So there's not really, of course there's this idea that somebody will come and we'll fix each other. And sometimes that happens. Also, I want to say that you never know. But today, I would advise spending some time with yourself, because the kind of cliche is that once we start liking ourselves and we feel like we don't really need anybody, then we meet the good people. And I felt that it happened to me as well, like in a way that when I finally found the peace inside me, I was able to have that lifting, healthy type of love that old me would have thought it's super boring. And I think that's the thing that most of people that I know struggle with, that nothing else than kind of very high intensity stuff feels good.
Yeah.
And for that, it's like we have gone through that, embracing boredom. And it doesn't mean it has to be like boring, but it's just like different kind of dynamics in the relationship.
I guess there's a contentment that comes with that, right? To feeling content. And I think the way that I would maybe say on that question that I asked as well is the mindfulness on how you're approaching it. Because for some people, they really struggle, I guess, to meet others. And there is this weird shift in society where, you know, there's a lot of people in their 30s single. And for women, that's a very fearful place. But I think having that mindfulness around the using of the apps or how many dates are going on and how you feel is probably a healthy navigation system to kind of put in place with all of these great things that you were saying, like the yoga nidra, the meditation, setting the boundaries, which is your serotonin, you know, and then maybe trying the 30-day dopamine.
Not being on the dating app for 30 days. And one thing I did that I liked was actually writing a list about the things I'm ready to let go in a relationship world. And then I burned that letter. And then I wrote a list about the things I'm ready to receive in my future relationship. Extremely powerful practice. I love it, love it, love it. So think about and really feeling how you want to feel in 5 years. Who are you surrounded with? How do you feel in your body? What are you wearing? Where are you living? So I swear that it really changes something in your brain and will help you take steps towards that place.
Yeah, I love that we've ended on that because I think we do so much that with our work. Like, where do we want our work to be in 5 years' time? Where do I want my company to be in 3 years' time? And we set really like actionable goals and steps or, you know, words to get us to that phase. And I think it's very similar, like setting an intention for what you want to bring in. And I was in LA in January and I was with a friend driving home and he said, never look in your wind mirror because you're always looking at the past, always look forward. And I think that's such an important acknowledgement from who you want to bring into your life is if you're always looking in the side view mirror of what had happened and what's affected you, you're living in that state of intentionality. Whereas if you're actually looking forward and you're looking out onto the road and you're thinking, what do I want to bring in? The only things that are going to come and sit within your way are those things that you're naturally wanting to bring.
Yeah.
And I think that is really powerful. We do so much of that with our work and we very rarely do it with our personal life. So I think that's something that I've definitely started doing in the last year, which I found to be really powerful. So when I do my end of year reflection on work, I now also do it on my personal life.
Yeah. And also like the ability to dream from the future, because usually we dream from the past.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it's pretty challenging actually to kind of try to dream about the stuff that you never seen or experienced or whatever. And that's embracing your creativity.
Yeah.
Which is also a great source of dopamine, by the way. So whatever is your way of expressing your creativity, you should do it. So if all the listeners there, just be honest to yourself. Don't be shy. And, you know, if you want to play a guitar, play guitar, you know, or dance on the tables or whatever, you know, makes your heart sing. So I think that's kind of the thing in life that instead of now following protocols, wellness protocols and things, it's just like learning how to live. And I loved because when my little one, he's now 6, so he was a year and 10 months and I was putting him to sleep. And I asked like, what was the best thing about this day? And he's staring at me and he's like, just to learn to live. And I was like, oh.
I love the profound wisdoms that 4 or 6 year olds come out with.
1 year, 10 months at that
time. At 1 year.
Yeah, he learned very early. So I was like, I felt so small at that time that he's just 1. He knows so much more than we do. And this is just the great thing about kids, that we should like really keep them open to that kind of wisdom that they carry.
So it wraps me up to my last question, which is, Dr. Emilia, what does live well, be well mean to you?
Live well, be well means that we're living in alignment with our true selves and values. And health becomes as a byproduct then. And I think that when we're living in alignment, we want to take care of ourselves. And when we do that, we actually take care of the world. So it's kind of a deep thing.
I agree. I mean, it very much aligns with self-compassion.
Yeah.
When we look after ourselves, we can make the right decisions for our health and for everyone else around us. So I think that the authenticity is such a big thing. So important to talk about that in today's world. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the book, The Healing Power of Hormones, which is out now. And I absolutely loved this read. I believe that, everyone should connect more to their hormonal state, especially women. And, I think love, heartbreak, addiction, they're all things that we're all in one moment of our life are going to struggle with and conquer.
Yeah.
So thank you for kind of holding our hand through it.
Thank you. I also believe that love is a big teacher for us.
It is.
Thank you. It was so nice to be here.
Oh, thank you.